Class, let's talk about how to debug. So you have an IDE, you could potentially use debugger, but I would highly recommend right now using the organic methods to debug your program. It's just I guess I'm old-fashioned. Anyways, so look at the warning messages and error messages that might come out from your program, especially right now your program is so small. If there are warnings or error messages, that must be something that the compiler is trying to tell you. So that's the first tip. The second tip is that I would usually use a different data set to test the program and see what kind of what kind of information I can get, what kind of pattern I can see how it behaves. Then I would try to read my code very carefully from each line and try to think about my reasoning, my logic, and see if I can actually spot out where the code there's something wrong. But if I cannot do that, for example, sometimes when the code just basically failed, it stopped running somewhere, I will use cout to print out value or print out a statement so that I know, hey, okay, it execute until this point and then it stopped working here, and so I would put some cout statement to see or to print out value of certain variables. If all this failed, I actually recommend that you go and take a break. Sometimes it actually worked for me many times. I would go off and go to lunch with a friend, or I would just go do something else for an hour or even days, and then all of a sudden I come back, look at the code, hey, I found a bug. If for a long time you struggle restarting the project, especially for you right now, the projects are not really that long, restarting is a good thing. You learn something from last trial, we redo it, you have some new insights. Those are the tips that I have for debugging. Another thing is to sometimes think about common mistakes that a lot of people would make, and so check for those when you are debugging. For example, sometimes we forgot to initiate variables, and so the value come out like random. Sometimes when we design loops, like I said, a lot of times we would off by 1 because the boundary value wasn't set exactly as we expected. We sometimes exceed the boundary for the data. At this point, you might not see it so clearly, but for example, we have a boundary of 40 hours for the work hours, right? So that is in a way called data boundary, but in that case it doesn't happen that we might have so much of an error. But check those though, like I will always add a test case of when exactly is 40, what will happen. For example, division by 0, I think some of you hate that in the last assignment for sum and averages. And then there are sometimes unintentionally convert the type, or unintentionally didn't convert the type. Sometimes we use equal when you try to compare two values, you forgot that in C++ we need to use two equals to compare values. So those are the common mistakes that people make. I thought we would debug together so that you see what I was trying to get to, at least in some aspect. So let's run this program. This is the paycheck program actually, and then I would try to type in, let's say we work 60 hours and then the wage is $100 per hour, but then you see the gross pay actually come out 0, net pay is 0, and tax is 0.2. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? So it really, I always try to enter more data points to see how the program behave. So since I've entered 60, which is more than it is overtime, there's overtime pay. So let's see if when there's no overtime pay, what will happen. So when I enter 30 hours and the wage is 200, hey, the gross pay actually is correct. The tax is still the same, kind of random, but then the net pay is because in this program is the 20% tax rate. So if you do the math, it's actually correct. So what's going on then? Then we go and look into the program, and then there's a warning. Gross pay is actually used to initialize whenever if condition is false. So it didn't got initialized. So it seems like gross pay here is not being used. But even if you forgot, to look at this particular line as the experiment go, gross pay is okay when you calculate less than 40 hours. It only has a problem here, so it means that there's something didn't happen here. And so apparently also combined with this statement, it means you can see that there's no gross pay here being assigned. So when it calculate the taxes, calculate the net pay, it doesn't have a base. So let's add the line to calculate the gross pay, because we forgot to add the overtime to the regular pay. So let's see what happens when we run this. So the warning went away. When we save, let's try again for the higher number of hours. Hey, what happened? The gross pay is so much, and then the net pay now is a lot. So let's see. What we can do, we can actually see out some numbers. That's one possibility. But let's see if we can just read the code and understand if there's something went wrong. So the overtime pay equals to the number of hours times pay rate times overtime rate. It looks good. And then for the regular pay, 40 hours times overtime pay. So it actually times this number and not the regular pay is not times to the pay rate. So I think this is where things went wrong. So we changed it, we compile it, do a test again. Look much better. Now it's 7,000, which is the correct number. Net pay is the correct number, and so it's only the taxes is 0.2. But if you remember, when we run the program with the 30 hours and 200, the taxes is also 0.2. So let's see, because the calculation is right, so the taxes actually was calculated right. Then it must be then when you print it out, there's something wrong, and if you notice, it's because the tax rate is being printed out and not the taxes. So now we save it, run it. 60 is here, 60, 100, perfect. Run it again. Okay. Which is 30. It always stay there, the cursor. Okay, 200. Okay, it works really well. So let's try 40 then, just so we make sure that our program is good. Let's say it's $100. So 4,000, 20%, 800, 3,200. So it's correct. So you see, I actually test 3 different cases. One is so I guess it's you know that the input basically is divided into 3, basically almost 3 parts, right? One more smaller than or equal to 40 hours and more than 40 hours. So this is the end of the module 3. I hope the information is helpful to you, and don't hesitate if you have any questions. I'm here to help. You can use inbox, and I invite you all to set up an appointment with me so that we can talk about anything you want, but we also can talk about how I can help you to succeed in this class. I will see you again very soon.